Effects of solar activity on lower layers of the Earth's atmosphere are more difficult to measure. Powerful though solar flares may be, the energy reaching the Earth from even a large flare is much less than the energy contained in weather patterns on the Earth. It is therefore difficult to understand how a flare or related disturbances on the Sun can have much effect on our day-to-day weather. However, several scientists have reported changes in weather patterns occurring when changes in solar activity take place. Others have reported that changes in the annual growth patterns of tree rings vary with the number of sunspots over the decades. The world climate was rather warm throughout a period of increased sunspots during the 12th and 13th century. The Middle Ages warm epoch actually lasted from the 12th through 14th centuries. On the other hand, the climate was unusually cold during the 15th and 16th centuries, and later in the 17th and 18th centuries when sunspots were extremely infrequent. The connection between sunspots and weather or climate is far from proven, but the possibility must be taken seriously and is of considerable practical importance. For example, another cold spell like that accompanying the Maunder Minimum would seriously cut world food production. Perhaps the ultimate test of whether changes in the sun affect our climate will be to find out whether the climate on Mars varies at the same time. So what this book is saying is pretty much that they found a correlation between sunspots and climate change, but history has shown that sunspots create a warming effect, but they still think that it's us and not the sun that's carbon dioxide that we're emitting that's causing global warming.
The New Mexico Observatory that mysteriously closed more than a week ago is now back open. The sudden closure of the Sunspot Observatory near Alamogordo made news around the world. News 13's Elena Mendoza is live there with more. Elena.
Kim, nearby residents have finally been able to return home. Many are still frustrated about the closure as rumors continue to swirl.
Some attack on the observatory so that couldn't function. The United States couldn't use that for data or whatever they're looking at. I just really have no idea.
Kind of seems like they didn't want people to see the rocket that was getting launched to measure things on the sun with x-rays, so they just shut down the base so nobody could get pictures.
ARA, or Association of Universities for Research and Astronomy, which operates the facility, released a statement saying it was closed as a precautionary measure to address a security issue. The group added there's an ongoing investigation into criminal activity that occurred there, and they became concerned that a suspect potentially posed a threat to the safety of staff and residents. They didn't want to explain what threat that was. We also spoke to security called in to monitor the grounds. They say they've been dealing with secondhand problems because of that closure. People have tried to jump the fence, there have been looters, and some even trying to break into the observatories, possibly to solve the mystery.
Some people have been compliant, some people may not have. Everything's still up in the air. Of course, everyone's going to be skeptics and say it's aliens or it's leaking of information, however they want to go about it. But I'm pretty sure there's a reason that they're keeping it super tight.
Escalante says they turned away about 150 people over the weekend. We're told most residents here are ARA employees. Escalante says the security team arrived on Friday. They will be staying to keep watch on the area until further notice. Kim, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Elena. Now, it looks like no one's been arrested because ARA says in their statement that they don't want to release any more information because it might, quote, alert the suspect.
The reason for shutting down the Sunspot Observatory is kind of suspicious too. And you would just hear me out. Okay, so This article by Earth Sky says, Update September 20, 2018. Reuters and other media are reporting that the mysterious 11-day closure of Sunspot Solar Observatory in New Mexico stemmed from an FBI investigation of a janitor suspected of using the facility's wireless internet service to view and distribute child pornography. Federal court documents filed Wednesday, September 19, revealed this information. The suspect reportedly became agitated, leading to the closing of the observatory for the sake of staff safety. Update September 16, 2018. So this was before. It says the Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, AURA, issued the following statement about the status of the Sunspot Solar Observatory at Sacramento Peak, New Mexico. The observatory has been closed and residents and staff have been asked to stay off the mountain. Since September 6, the statement said Sunspot Solar Observatory will transition back to regular operations as of Monday, September 17th, the AURA statement said. So at the Sunspot Observatory, they evacuated the staff for their safety, is what they said. But reading this paragraph, it seems like it's not so much for their safety. It says, House wants to know why the FBI had local law authorities help with the evacuation, but refused to tell them what it was about. So they didn't tell the employees what their threat was. They didn't care about that. They wanted us up there to help evacuate, but nobody would tell us anything. We went up there and everything was good. There was no threat. Nobody would identify any specific threat. We hung out for a little while, then we left. No reason for us to be there. Nobody would tell us what we're supposed to be watching out for. So their story just doesn't really, I'm skeptical of it. It just doesn't add up. The ocean is the biggest sink of carbon dioxide on the earth. The oceans currently contain 39,000 gigatons of carbon, while the atmosphere contains only 750 gigatons. About 38% of the 1,300 gigatons of carbon dioxide released by humans over the last 200 years has already entered the oceans. So gigatons is 1 billion, and it's just crazy because the amount of gigatons of carbon in the ocean compared to in the atmosphere is remarkable. And it took 200 years for 1,300 gigatons to make its way into the oceans. But there's 39,000 gigatons of carbon dioxide already in the ocean. This article, titled Warmer Oceans Release CO2 Faster Than Thought, it says, as the world's oceans warm, their massive stores of dissolved carbon dioxide may be quick to bubble back out into the atmosphere and amplify the greenhouse effect, according to a new study. The oceans capture around 30% of human carbon dioxide emissions and hide it in their depths. This slows the march of global warming somewhat, but climate records from the end of the last ice age show that as temperatures climb, the trend reverses and the oceans emit CO2, which exacerbates warming. So they're trying to argue for the greenhouse effect, but essentially they're saying that temperatures release CO2 from the world's oceans, which is a much larger bank for CO2 than human emissions. So it's pretty crazy. Client Earth Communications says the ocean has sucked up about a quarter of the carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere since we began burning fossil fuels for energy during the Industrial Revolution. Then it goes on to say phytoplankton are the main reason the ocean is one of the biggest carbon sinks. These microscopic marine algae and bacteria play a huge role in the world's carbon cycle, absorbing about as much carbon as all the plants and trees on land combined. But plastic pollution in our ocean means plankton are eating microplastic, which is impacting the rate at which they are trapping carbon in our ocean. We're using the law to push for an end to plastic pollution. So it's saying that phytoplankton cannot fix carbon like they used to because of plastic. So we just learned from the article before the last that warmer oceans are releasing CO2 faster than originally thought. And photorespiration is a thing that plants do. It says a light-dependent process in some plants resulting in the oxidation of glycolic acid and release of carbon dioxide that under some environmental conditions, such as high temperatures, tends to inhibit photosynthesis. Plants release more carbon dioxide into atmosphere than expected. A new study involving ANU and international collaborators has found plants release more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere through respiration than expected. Plants use photosynthesis to capture carbon dioxide and then release half of it into the atmosphere through respiration. Plants also release oxygen into the atmosphere through photosynthesis. Professor Owen Atkin from ANU said the study revealed that the release of carbon dioxide by plant respiration around the world is up to 30% higher than previously predicted. He said that carbon dioxide released by plants every year was now estimated to be about 10 to 11 times the emissions from human activities, rather than the previous estimate of 5 to 8 times.
Okay, I have to explain something, or I have a confession. I'm a testimonial. This is my testimonial. Because I was a witness to this video that I saw on YouTube about maybe like a year or two ago. There's these scientists was coming out and saying that global warming was not from man-made carbon emissions, that it was actually from sunspots. And what they did, they looked at the normal graph that was based off of the greenhouse effect, and it was just on the Earth. And this is what I made up, because this is like a replication of what the original graph was like, kind of. But they were saying, you know, CO2 causes an increase in temperature, but when they did it, it was always, CO2 was always off a little bit by the increase in temperature. And the highlighted one is CO2, and the increase in temperature is just the pencil. And this is what the original graph looked like. And these scientists, there's whistleblowers, and they came out and they said they did one based off of sunspots. And when they did this, when they did the experiment on sunspots, the CO2 lined up perfectly with the rise in temperature. So that proves that it is sunspots and not CO2. It's not a greenhouse effect. And I am a witness to this. This is my testimony.
Acts and facts impact climate change. Does carbon dioxide drive global warming? By Larry Vardaman, Ph.D. Asterisk. Wednesday, October 1st, 2008. Share email, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. Introduction. In the latest of my series of articles on global warming, I offered evidence that global warming appears to be occurring. Evidence seems to be growing that fluctuations in the electromagnetic field of the sun may be responsible for it. Point 1. Here I would like to expand my arguments that carbon dioxide from man's activities is probably not the primary cause for global warming. Major weaknesses have developed in the logic that carbon dioxide causes global warming. In a second article to follow, I will describe a new theory of climate change based on the influence of the sun. Arguments against carbon dioxide driving global warming. In his presentation An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore argues that the correlation between Earth's average global temperature and the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere irrefutably demonstrates that carbon dioxide drives global warming. He compares the temperature trend in the so-called hockey stick diagram with the exponential increase in carbon dioxide measured at Mauna Loa, Hawaii, for the past 50 years. A similar plot of temperature over the past 1,000 years is shown in Figure 1. Such a diagram is given this name because the temperature plot looks like a long-handled hockey stick. This figure shows a superposition of average global temperature curve by different research groups using different data and/or methodologies. For example, the red curve shows the results obtained by Moberg et al. 3, while the blue curve shows the results of Esper et al. 4. The average temperature in the handle of the hockey stick over the period from about 1000 to 1850 AD remains relatively uniform, followed by a sudden rise in the blade since 1850, supposedly following the recent increase in carbon dioxide. Figure 1 seems to provide compelling evidence that global warming is caused by an increase in carbon dioxide. The sudden steep rise in temperature following a long period of uniform temperature prior to the industrial age is to be inextricably activities since 1850 or so. However, when one examines the figure more carefully, the argument begins to fall apart. The hockey stick diagram has recently come under critical scrutiny. Most paleoclimatologists work with more widely accepted temperature plots, which have been used for many years in standard climate research and textbooks. These individual charts contain wide variations in temperature over the past 1,000 years, in opposition to the impression given by Gore's temperature diagram. In fact, they normally show a 400-year-long warm period from about 1000 to 1400 AD, which is known as the medieval optimum in Europe. During this period, crops flourished, the economy boomed, and the Vikings settled parts of Greenland where the ice sheets had melted back. From about 1400 to 1900 AD, a 500-year cold period occurred. Certain crops like grapes could no longer be grown, the economy declined, and the Vikings were forced out of Greenland by the encroaching snow and ice. Sunspots were found to be fewer during this time period, which became known as the Maunder minimum. The coldest center portion of this period with the fewest number of sunspots is called the Little Ice Age. The canals in Holland, unlike today, froze over each winter. These changes in temperature associated with sunspot number suggest that the sun may influence the climate over millennial cycles. However, studies over many years have not been able to confirm a convincing physical mechanism between sunspots and weather or climate. When the temperature trend in the blade of the hockey stick between 1850 and 2000 is examined in more detail, as shown in Figure 2, it is found that the average global temperature doesn't increase exponentially like the measurements of carbon dioxide do at Mauna Loa. The temperature increases between about 1850 and 1940, and then decreases for a 30-year period from 1940 to 1970, after which it begins to climb again. This is very peculiar if carbon dioxide is driving global temperature, because the greatest increase in output from industrial production and the associated release of carbon dioxide would have occurred during this period. Following World War II, industrial productivity and the release of carbon dioxide climbed rapidly. Yet temperature fell, prompting many climatologists to express concern that we were headed for ice age. Once again, the average global temperature began to warm in 1970. The temperature and carbon dioxide diagrams do not match up, as one would expect if carbon dioxide concentration is driving temperature. Gore also uses an argument that the correlation between carbon dioxide concentration and temperature in ice core records from the distant past, as shown in Figure 3, demonstrates that carbon dioxide and temperature are strongly related. However, a statistical correlation between two variables doesn't determine which one is causing the relationship and which one is responding. If one looks at these data in finer detail, as shown in Figure 4, it becomes evident that temperature is driving the carbon dioxide concentration, not the other way around. Changes in temperature trends led similar features in carbon dioxide and methane by some 800 years in this analysis. One explanation for this relationship is that warming of the oceans releases carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, increasing its concentration. This is likely due to the fact that the oceans contain much more carbon dioxide than the atmosphere, and they release carbon dioxide at warm temperatures and absorb it at cool temperatures. A qualifying statement must be made regarding the data shown in Figures 3 and 4. The horizontal scales shown in the figures assume an old Earth. The correlations may be valid, but the actual ages and lags must be much less if one accepts a young Earth. Conclusion. Individual temperature records commonly used by climatologists and paleoclimatologists show that the past 1,000 years have been marked by periodic warm and cold periods, not by a uniform climate trend. Trend since 1550 continue farming following the age, rather than sudden upsurge, long period of relatively uniform temperatures. The detailed temperature record since 1850 shows a temperature decline between 1940 and 1970, which flies in the face of the explanation that a continuous exponential increase in carbon dioxide causes global warming. And the simultaneous record of temperature and carbon dioxide concentration in ice cores indicates that carbon dioxide concentration changes after temperature changes, not before, indicating that carbon dioxide is the result, not the cause, of global warming.